Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a special week of the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. As courtesy of Speedo Australia, we are speaking to two amazing swimmers in Elijah Winnington and Zac Stubblety-Cook.
Yeah, very excited this week, and we've got to thank Speedo Australia for helping us out to get these guests on. We've got Elijah first, and we've got Zac Stubblety-Cook later on. Two fantastic swimmers who did really well at Australian trials, which of course we'll talk about, and other things as well, so stay tuned.
So these episodes are going to be a little bit shorter than our usual uploads here on the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. So we're just going to jump straight into our first conversation this week with reigning world champion in the 400 meters freestyle, Elijah Winnington. So Elijah, welcome on to the Propulsion Swimming Podcast. First of all, I've got to start with this question. Aussie freestyle, what's the secret? Because whether it's male, female, short distance or long distance, you guys are crushing it right now.
Yeah, I don't know if there is a particular secret, but I think there's a lot of history there. And so particularly for young Australians, we look up to the Ian Thorpes and, you know, people nowadays are looking up to Ariane Titmus and all that sort of stuff. So you're always kind of striving or you're wanting to be like a freestyler. And I guess just the programs have really led and been driven that way. But you are right, Australian freestyle's in a good spot at the moment.
Is it as simple as role models, or is it the case of there's something that you guys do differently in training? You're taught stroke very technically from a very early age. How does it work when you're making that journey as a freestyler?
I think it's a bit of both. I definitely think technically in Australia we focus a lot on technique rather than just slogging it out or just trying to get many Ks and stuff like that. It's pretty instilled in us from a very early age, and I think that's just because we have a lot of experienced coaches, particularly on the Australian team at the moment, that know what they're doing and have coached athletes for the past, 20 plus years. So we're very fortunate that way, so it's always been driven in us that way. But I also, I just think that sometimes it happens to work out that way, that at a given time, a nation is performing better in a particular stroke.
You've mentioned Ian Thorpe, Grant Hackett as your role models and inspiration. Do they ever give you advice or ever come to training to give you advice?
I was very fortunate that when I was in my very junior swimming, I think I was 6 years old, I was training at the Miami Aquatic Centre on the Gold Coast, where Grant was training at that point in time with Dennis Cottrell. So I always kind of saw Grant, every now and again, but, I saw him from afar. I can't say we ever really spoke or anything like that. And me and Ian haven't had any particular conversations, but I was very fortunate enough to train with Ian's former coach, Doug Frost, in 2017 for a couple months there, and learnt a lot from him and sort of really just grassrooted me right way through my senior swimming in how to, swim freestyle and do it successfully.
Absolutely. So let's take a look then at your performances in Melbourne a week or two ago now. 403, a 343, and then two solid swims in the 200 and 800. How would you rate your own performances a week or two ago?
Trials are always a tricky thing because the main purpose of a team trials is to qualify for the international team. So that's how our coach prepares us to make sure that we're in our best spot to qualify for the team. And if you do that and, it doesn't really matter what times they are, in saying that, I probably would have liked to go a little bit faster. When you're at the top of the world, you're kind of always striving for that extra 1% or that extra little bit. So I wasn't far off it, but, I can't be disappointed because I did get the job done. I made the world's team. And so, while those times aren't going to be where they need to be in a few weeks' time in Japan, I'm confident I can get it there in time.
Yeah, I mean, the 403 was probably your standout swim. That 343 is a very good time. What kind of training do you do to hit such equal splits per 50?
So our training blocks vary depending on what time of the season we're in. So very early on in the season is about just getting fit and just maxing out kilometers and doing high aerobic work. So I'll be doing from anywhere to 60 to 70 kilometers a week in the pool, plus then maybe 4 or 5 hours of extra dry land on the bike or cardio, stuff like that. And then sort of the middle of the season is about hitting those high Ks, but doing it with a lot of intensity. So the extra little cardio or aerobic drops off, and it's a lot about race pace and all that sort of stuff. And then towards the end is the nitty gritty stuff where the Ks drop a little bit. So I'll be maxing out at about 50K to 45K per week. And it will be really intensive, a lot of just pure race pace, a lot of suited sessions. So it just depends on what type of the season. But it is a full year commitment to sort of get going for one major meet.
You said, that the whole point of trials is make the team. So over here in Britain, I don't know if you're aware that the times to make the team are just ludicrous. So everyone really has to go into a meet like that completely rested, fully tapered. And even if you win your event, if you win the 400 free over here, you might not make the team. But over there, I think the times are a little bit easier to hit, and it's about getting that 1-2. So do you train through a meet like that, knowing that you are a world-class swimmer, you can hit these times quite comfortably? What's your outlook going in?
Yeah, so for me, I really focus on, like I said, just making the team. Our times are still quite solid. I think there were only 6 males that made individual qualifying times at our trials in Melbourne last week. So typically our standards are, I did notice that Great Britain's times, they weren't as hard, but our times are usually taken from what was to make the final at the previous World Championships or World Standards. So top 8 in the world last year, which is, I mean, nothing to complain about. Like, it's still quite tough. But for me, when I'm swimming a 3:41, last year at Worlds, that's my personal best, and I think it was a 3:45 high was to make the final. So that was our qualifying time. I knew I could do that. Even if I wasn't on my best day. While I definitely had rest going into the trials. You can't go in there just thinking that you're going to be on the team, because that's when things go majorly wrong. So I was rested and ready to go, but I guess I'm a big swimmer to the environment and those that are around me. So, I'm sure if there was somebody going 3:41 in the pool on that day, I could have probably lifted to go the same thing, even though I was the same prepared. For me, it's all about the race, and that's what it was in Melbourne, and sort of less about the time it was to qualify.
Well, speaking of swimmers swimming around you, Sam Short had a pretty solid meet. I mean, how good is it to have Sam there next year as domestic competition?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Sam's had a crazy breakout year thus far domestically in Australia. I think he's going into Worlds with maybe 2 number 1 times in the world, and maybe a top 5 in the 1500 or something like that. So, it's crazy to have somebody going into events that are the favourite to win 2 events. That doesn't happen very often in our sport. Sam's got a good head on his shoulders, and it's awesome to race him. He's really hungry and he's a good fighter, and that's everything you could wish for, because that's just going to be and make me go faster. I don't see it as a daunting thing or anything like that. If anything, I love the challenge, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we can do together on the international stage.
So what is your target then for Worlds this summer? What's your expectation?
I actually really try and take a step back from putting that sort of pressure of I want to swim this time or I want to win this medal or anything like that. I obviously go in there wanting to do the best I can, but if there's anything I've learnt in my sort of few years on the international stage, and I've achieved some success on the international stage, is that the success lasts, or that feeling lasts, a minute, and then it's all over. And if that's all you're going there to chase, then you're going to walk away very disappointed, even if you do achieve it. So I really just go there to enjoy myself and have fun. See some people from around the world that I only get to see once a year. I'm friends with a lot of the British guys, so I'm really looking forward to just even catching up with them and making the most of those moments, because when it's all said and done, and I've hung the cap and goggles up, that I will look back and those are the memories that I'll cherish. So, I want to go there and swim the best I can. But first and foremost, I just want to enjoy myself out there and see what that brings.
That's a ridiculously holistic view on what is elite sport, but it kind of mirrors the way that you race. And you've mentioned before, if someone's racing fast next to you, you step up. You're just focusing in the moment, and I think that mirrors what we see on an international stage for the 400 meters freestyle, especially, is that the fastest swimmer going in doesn't always win that major meet. That very rarely happens. And it's a lot of the time about racing the field and racing the tactics, and almost your outlook on the sport sounds like it suits that perfectly.
Yeah, definitely. It took a very tough lesson for me to learn that. I was going into the Olympics as the favorite by a fair mile, and that's all I could think about. And it completely ruined my experience of what an Olympic Games is. And that was really sad to me. That was the saddest part, not just, swimming to maybe the standard I didn't want to swim to, but the fact that I just let it overshadow my whole experience. And then I went into the Worlds last year, with a guy that swam a 3:41, the first time anyone swam a 3:41 in the past decade, and he was the fastest going in, and I thought, there's no way I'm going 3:41, but, who cares? I'm here to have fun. I've done it the hard way. Let's just enjoy it. And then next thing I know is I'm the one swimming 3:41. So it's it's pretty hard to just, want all these things, because 9 times out of 10, it's never going to come to pass. And even if it does, it's not worth it. Even just sharing a quick story about, there was the news recently that Christoph Milak pulled out from Worlds. And I had to really take a step back, and I thought that was really sad, because that's now 3 of, I would say, the most successful male swimmers in the past decade, with Dressel, Adam Peaty, and now Christoph Milak, all Olympic champions, all world record holders. They've achieved what anybody would have wanted to achieve in the sport, and yet they're all really struggling. And it just goes to show that it's not the results, or it's not, achieving these things that is going to produce happiness, or it's going to make your career fulfilled. It's the little moments, and they're the moments I'm trying to chase. So
one of our final questions to you then was 400 free world record, do you think it'll ever go? But that's just not on your mind, not in the slightest.
I'd be lying to you if I said it wasn't. Of course, it's definitely something that's on my mind. I have to wake up and I motivate myself, and that these are things that do motivate me. But I don't think it's the be all and end all for me. I'm chasing something that I've been told is impossible to chase, is that under the 340 barrier. If it comes to pass, it comes to pass. And I think it's one of those things that I believe I have it in me that I can do it. But it's just going to take a really special moment to do it. That's the moment I'm looking forward to.
You're going to be playing around with tactics. Speaking of your last swim at Worlds, you kind of played the field a little bit with Lucas Martin, especially that third 100, I think it was. Are you going to be taking that tactic forward with you into this Worlds?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a way I've kind of always swum my races, is I've always tried to go out hard and really just dictate the race, because that either burns the guys next to me that think they need to keep up with me, or they fall too far behind and they can't catch up. That third 100 I just use to really just absorb. If people are just coming at me, then I can just, not worry and not stress, and just kind of tap back into those Ks that I always do, and just, stick to that pace that I know I can stick to. Because it just, it's like a recharging shield that then just builds my energy for that last 50. And, I'm in just as much pain as I know those other guys are. I've just got a lot of fight. I love the fight, and I'm looking forward to it if it happens at Worlds.
So, Elijah, we've only got a short amount of time with you, so we'll finish this podcast with some quick fire questions.
Yeah, go for it.
What's your favourite event in swimming?
The 400 freestyle.
Who is your swimming idol?
All time, Cameron McAvoy.
Oh, love it.
Ooh.
Love it, especially after last week. What is your proudest moment in swimming so far?
Worlds last year.
What's the hardest set you've ever done in training?
There's a good set that we do pretty mid on in the season where it's a lot of lactate production. So quite hard, long 400s aerobic into, two-row max efforts, a series of, 6 times on short amount of rest. So yeah, it gets tough.
Lush. And final question gets to know you a little bit away from the swimming pool. If you were to go on a road trip, there's 3 spaces in the car. You can take friends, family, celebrities, anyone you want. Who would you take with you?
I would take my friends, Kyle Chalmers, Adam Peaty, and James Guy.
Oh, love it. Love it. Well, Elijah, thank you for coming on to the podcast this week, and best of luck this summer in Japan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it, guys.
So, Dan, brilliant to speak to Elijah, a man who certainly is moving the event of the 400 freestyle forwards, but it's the attitude of his outlook on swimming, which is really important, especially like Elijah just said, with the likes of Milak pulling out of Worlds. We know Adam's out already. Dressel has had his time away from the sport. For someone who is going a 3:41 to have an outlook that he's just there enjoying the meet and seeing friends and getting to travel the world, essentially, I feel like that's something that swimming needs to take away. Like we need to look at this. This shouldn't be performance, or this shouldn't be a time-driven sport anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember Dressel saying something along the lines where, yes, he won 5 Olympic golds out in Tokyo, but the thing he remembers the most was, I believe, playing cards with the American team. Yeah. So it's the stuff around the performance that these swimmers remember, or athletes in general, I imagine, remember. So it's very interesting. It's a good outlook and it's a good message for all swimmers, younger, older, out there. And it's something to take away, because it's a good mentality to have, because then I hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, that he won't be out of the sport for a prolonged time, just like Adam, Milak and Dressel as well.
Absolutely. And if you weren't aware, if you haven't listened back to our Australian review podcast, Aussie Freestyle is very good. Like we say, it's in a very special place. It has always been in a very special place. So it's really fascinating to hear what one of the leading lights can reveal from the secrets inside of why there is this freestyle dominance over in Australia.
Well, he talked about technique. That was the first thing he talked about, was his technique from a very young age, and then still that, and then hopefully then you build on the stamina, endurance on top of that. And I think that you have the role models of Ian Thorpe, Grant Hackett, who have been there from day dot, let's say the year 2000 and before, and these guys look up to those guys. So it's interesting, and it's going to carry on. It is a snowball effect, isn't it? And it's going to carry on for potentially forever. Who knows? But Elijah is leading the way at the moment, I would say, along with Sam Short, who obviously he spoke about nicely as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, best of luck to Elijah this summer, and thank you again for Speedo Australia for organising this podcast. We'll be back in 2 days' time as we speak to world champion, Commonwealth champion, and world record holder Zac Stubblety-Cook. And you're not going to want to miss that episode, because just like Elijah, it was a holistic outlook on swimming.
Yeah, Australian swimmers seem to have a very different mindset, it seems. So, stay tuned for that one. It's very, very interesting, and I look forward to 2 days' time.
So if you haven't subscribed already to the Propulsion Swimming Podcast, please do so on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And yes, me and Dan will see you in just 2 days' time.
Thank you for listening, everyone, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You've been listening to the Propulsion Swimming Podcast with Scott and Dan. We want to thank you for joining us and invite you to subscribe to the show, as well as checking out the Propulsion Swimming YouTube channel for weekly tutorials and videos to get your swimming fix. We will be back next week. Until then, we'll catch you on the next one.